I watched my son's face turn pale as I held up my phone, showing him the school notification that just shattered his comfortable little world. His lunch account was $50 in the negative. $50 he spent without thinking twice on overpriced cafe breakfasts and vending machine garbage, while his siblings managed their budgets just fine. "Mom, I can explain," Jake started, but I raised my hand. "Save it. I need to see your account balance first." The kitchen felt smaller than usual, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, highlighting the tension etched across his 16-year-old face. My other two kids, Sarah and Marcus, were at their respective practices, completely unaware that their brother had blown through his entire year's lunch budget in less than 4 months. When the school switched to the digital payment system, I knew it would be a hassle. The platform only allowed large deposits, so I loaded $1,000 into each kid's account at the start of September. That was enough for lunch every school day, plus about $200 extra for emergencies or occasional treats. I made it crystal clear this money had to last until June. Sarah and Marcus got it immediately. They checked their balances weekly, packed extra snacks on game days, avoided the ridiculously overpriced vending machines where a single Pop-Tart cost $4 and an energy drink ran $5. The school cafe was even worse, charging $8 for a basic bagel. But Jake? He apparently decided rules didn't apply to him. "How much do you have in your savings?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. He shifted his weight, avoiding eye contact. "Like $3,000, maybe." $3,247, I corrected, having checked his account that morning when the school email arrived. "You're going to transfer $500 into your lunch account right now." "What? That's not fair." His voice cracked with indignation. "That's my money. I earned that." "And you should have thought about that before spending $50 more than you had on breakfast sandwiches and whatever else you've been buying. You need $500 to make it through the rest of the year. Either you pay it or you pack your lunch every single day." Jake's jaw dropped. "You're seriously making me pay for school lunch? What kind of parent does that?" The accusations stung, but I held firm. This wasn't about being cruel. This was about him learning that actions have consequences, that budgets matter, that he couldn't just sail through life assuming someone would always bail him out. The kind who taught you how to save money and budget since you were 12. The kind who watched you save up and buy yourself a gaming computer worth over $2,000 last year. You know how to manage money, Jake. You chose not to. He pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling slightly as he opened his banking app. For a moment, I thought he might refuse, might storm off to his room and slam the door like he did when he was younger. Instead, he jabbed at the screen with aggressive swipes. "There? Happy now?" He shoved the phone toward me. The transfer confirmation glowed on the screen. $500, moved from his savings to cover the gap in his lunch account and get him through June. "I'm not happy," I said quietly. "I'm disappointed. Your brother and sister managed their money just fine. They pack snacks on practice days. They don't waste money on overpriced vending machines. Why couldn't you do the same? Maybe because I'm hungry? Maybe because football practice runs late and I don't have time to eat the sad sandwiches you pack? Then you tell me, and we figure it out together. You don't just spend money that isn't there and expect it to magically appear." He grabbed his backpack from the kitchen chair, his movements sharp and angry. "Whatever. Can I go now?" I nodded, watching him stomp toward the stairs. The front door opened before he reached them, and my ex-husband, Derek, walked in. We shared custody, and this was supposed to be my week, but he had a key for emergencies. "We need to talk," Derek said, his face already set in that particular expression that meant he'd decided I was wrong before hearing my side. Jake perked up immediately. "Dad, Mom is making me pay for school lunch. She took $500 from my account." Derek's eyes narrowed at me. "You did what?" "He spent his entire year's lunch budget in 4 months, I explained, keeping my tone level. He went $50 into the negative, buying overpriced cafe food instead of packing snacks like his siblings. I gave him 2 choices, pay to reload his account or pack lunch. He chose to pay." "That's ridiculous, Michelle. He's a growing teenage boy. He needs to eat." He can eat. He has $1,000 in his lunch account now. Or he could eat the food we have at home. Sarah and Marcus manage fine. Jake crossed his arms, a smug expression creeping across his face now that his father was here to defend him. Derek always did this, undermining my parenting decisions, making me out to be the unreasonable one. You're being too harsh, Derek continued. He's in football. Those practices are brutal.
Course he's hungrier than
The other kids. Sarah runs cross country. Marcus plays basketball. They're both athletes too, and they both figured out how to budget their money. Maybe you should have given him more to begin with. The familiar frustration bubbled up in my chest. This was exactly why our marriage fell apart. Derek couldn't stand firm on anything when it came to the kids. Every rule I set, he questioned. Every consequence I implemented, he softened. The kids learned quickly that Dad was the easy parent, the one who'd rescue them from their own poor choices. I gave all 3 kids the exact same amount, I said firmly. Jake made different choices. Now he's dealing with the consequences. Derek pulled out his phone. I'll transfer him the money back. This is absurd. Don't. The word came out sharper than I intended. If you do that, you're teaching him that responsibility doesn't matter, that someone will always bail him out when he messes up. I'm teaching him that his father has his back. You're teaching him to be financially irresponsible. Jake watched us like a tennis match, his head swiveling between his parents. I could see him calculating, figuring out how to play this situation to his advantage. Dad, can I stay at your place this week instead? Jake asked, his voice suddenly smaller, more vulnerable. I don't want to be here. My heart clenched, but I forced myself not to react. This was manipulation, pure and simple, and I wouldn't give in. Derek nodded. Yeah, bud, go pack a bag. Jake disappeared upstairs, leaving Derek and me in the kitchen. The silence stretched between us, heavy with years of disagreements and diverging parenting philosophies. You're pushing him away, Derek said quietly. Is that really what you want? I want him to learn responsibility. I want him to understand that money doesn't grow on trees and that his choices matter. He's 16. He's allowed to make mistakes. And I'm allowing him to fix his own mistake. That's how learning works. Derek shook his head, disappointment written across his features. I don't know what happened to you, Michelle. You used to be more understanding. The accusation hit its mark, sending a spike of doubt through my resolve. Was I being too harsh? Was this really about teaching Jake responsibility, or was it about something else? About proving I could be the strict parent, the one who didn't need Derek's approval or input? No, I pushed the doubt away. I was right about this. Jake needed to learn this lesson now, while the stakes were relatively low. Better he learned about budgeting with lunch money than later with rent or car payments or credit cards. Jake returned with his duffel bag, avoiding my eyes. I'll be back Sunday, I guess. I love you, I said, the words feeling inadequate but necessary. This isn't about punishing you. It's about helping you learn. He didn't respond, just followed his father out the door. The house felt emptier once they left, the quiet pressing in around me. I pulled out my phone and texted Sarah and Marcus, letting them know Jake would be at their dad's this week. Neither responded immediately, probably still at practice. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, second-guessing every decision I'd just made. The parent forums I sometimes browsed would probably be split on this. Half would call me too strict, damaging my relationship with my son over a few $100s. The other half would support teaching financial responsibility, especially to a kid who clearly knew how to save money when he wanted to. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. I transferred the money back to Jake's savings. He shouldn't have to pay for basic necessities. The tea burned bitter on my tongue. Of course he did. Of course Derek swooped in to be the hero, undoing everything I'd tried to teach in one simple transaction. Jake would learn nothing from this, except that Dad would always rescue him from Mom's unreasonable expectations. I typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on, he had enough money for lunch. He chose to spend it irresponsibly. But do what you want. You always do. His response came quickly. This is why the kids prefer staying at my place. The words stabbed deeper than they should have. Was it true? Did my kids prefer their father because I was the one who enforced rules and expectations while he played the cool parent, who gave them whatever they wanted? Sarah came home first, her cross-country gear sweaty and grass-stained. She grabbed water from the fridge and noticed my expression immediately. "What happened?" she asked, settling into the chair across from me. I explained the situation, watching her face carefully for judgment. Sarah was my eldest, at 17, sharp and observant, already planning for college with a scholarship committee's dream resume. "Jake's an idiot," she said, bluntly when I finished. "We all got the same money and the same rules. He just thought he was special." "Your father thinks I'm being too harsh." Sarah rolled her eyes, a gesture she'd perfected over the years. "Dad thinks any actual parenting is too harsh. Remember when I wanted to quit violin in 8th grade and you made me finish out the year? Dad said you were being cruel. Now I'm first chair in the school orchestra, and it's literally helping me get into college. You were right then, and you're right now." The validation helped, but doubt still gnawed at me. Sarah was naturally disciplined, a self-starter who rarely needed pushing. Jake was different, more impulsive, more likely to test boundaries and assume things would work out. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later, basketball under his arm, his 15-year-old frame all gangly limbs and growing pains. He'd clearly already heard what happened from Jake's texts in the group chat they all shared. "So, Jake finally faced consequences for something?" Marcus asked, grabbing 3 granola bars from the pantry. "About time." "Be nice to your brother," I said automatically. "I am being nice. Nicely pointing out that he always gets away with everything because Dad babies him," Sarah snorted into her water bottle. Marcus wasn't wrong. Jake had always been Derek's favorite, though my ex would deny it if confronted. But the evidence was there. Later curfews, fewer chores, more excuses made for poor choices. "How much trouble is he really in?" Marcus asked, his tone shifting to something more serious. Like, "Are you guys going to fight about this?" The question hung in the air. Marcus had been 10 when Derek and I divorced, old enough to remember the arguments, the tension, the eventual relief when we separated. He worried about conflict more than the other two, always trying to smooth things over. "We'll be fine," I assured him, hoping it was true. "This is just a disagreement about parenting styles. We've had them before." "Yeah, and they always end with Dad doing whatever he wants and you looking like the bad guy," Sarah observed. No offense. None taken, because she was absolutely right. Derek had built his relationship with the kids on being the fun parent, the permissive one, while I handled the actual work of raising responsible humans. They loved him for it and respected me grudgingly when they felt like it. My phone buzzed again, another text from Derek. "Jake says you embarrassed him in front of his girlfriend last week, too. What's going on with you?" I stared at the message, confusion replacing frustration. What is he talking about? What girlfriend? Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. Finally, Sarah spoke up. "Ashley? They've been dating like 2 months. She came over for dinner last Thursday." I remembered Thursday. I'd made lasagna, and Jake had brought a friend over. A girl, yes, but he'd introduced her as my friend Ashley, and they'd done homework together at the kitchen table. Nothing about the interaction suggested they were dating. "He introduced her as a friend," I said. "How was I supposed to know?" "He says you treated her like she was just some random person and didn't make a big deal about it," Marcus explained. "Apparently, that was embarrassing." The absurdity of it all crashed over me. I was supposed to somehow intuit that the girl Jake introduced as a friend was actually his girlfriend and then make a big production about it? This felt like another excuse Derek was grasping at to paint me as the insensitive parent. I texted back, "He introduced her as a friend. I treated her like a friend. How is that embarrassing?" The response took longer this time. When it came, it made my blood run cold. Maybe if you paid more attention to your kids instead of controlling every dollar they spend, you'd know what's actually going on in their lives. Sarah must have seen my expression change. "Mom, what did he say?" I showed her the text. Her face darkened with anger that matched my own. "That's garbage," she said flatly. "You literally ask us about our lives every day. Dad sees us twice a week and thinks that makes him parent of the year?" "Language," I said weakly. "No, he doesn't get to do this. He doesn't get to undermine you and then act like you're the problem." Marcus nodded agreement, his jaw set in that stubborn way that reminded me of my own father. "Want me to text him? Tell him he's being unfair?" "No," I said, though I appreciated the offer. "This is between your father and me. You kids shouldn't have to get involved." But they were already involved, had been involved since the divorce, caught in the middle of two different parenting philosophies that never quite aligned. I'd tried to shield them from it, tried to present a united front, but Derek made that impossible with his constant undermining. The weekend passed in tense silence. Jake stayed at his father's place. Sarah and Marcus tried to keep things normal, but the elephant in the room was impossible to ignore. Sunday evening came, and Jake still hadn't returned. I texted Derek, "Jake was supposed to come back today. He wants to stay here this week, too." I said yes. That's my custody week. He's 16. He gets to choose where he wants to be. Technically true in our custody agreement. Once the kids hit 16, they could decide their own schedules as long as both parents were informed. But this felt less like Jake making an independent choice and more like Derek encouraging him to avoid me. Monday morning, I drove Sarah and Marcus to school, the car quiet except for the radio playing softly. As we pulled up to the drop-off zone, I saw Jake standing near the entrance with a group of friends, laughing at something on his phone. He looked perfectly fine, completely unaffected by the conflict that had torn through our family. "Want me to punch him?" Marcus offered, only half joking. "No violence," I said, but I smiled despite myself. "Go learn something." They climbed out, and I watched them walk toward the building. Sarah veered toward Jake, said something that made him look up sharply, then continued past him with Marcus. Whatever she'd said, it wiped the smile off his face. My phone rang as I pulled away from the school. Derek's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "What?" I said instead of hello. "We need to talk about Jake's therapy appointment." I nearly slammed on the brakes. "What therapy appointment?" "The one I scheduled for him. He's been really stressed lately, and I think he needs someone to talk to about everything he's dealing with." Everything he's dealing with. As if being held accountable for his spending was some kind of trauma that required professional intervention. "You scheduled therapy without discussing it. With me first?" "I'm his parent too, Michelle. I don't need your permission." "Actually, according to our custody agreement, we're supposed to make medical decisions together. Therapy counts as medical." Silence on the other end. Then, "It's just an evaluation. I wanted to see if he'd benefit from it." "What's the real reason, Derek? Why are you really doing this?" More silence. Finally, he sighed. "The school counselor called me, said Jake's been struggling in his classes lately. His grades are slipping. I wanted to address it before it became a bigger problem." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "When were you planning to tell me this?" "I'm telling you now. After you already made the appointment? After you already decided I wasn't important enough to include in the decision? You're always so busy being the tough parent that I figured you'd just tell him to try harder. Sometimes kids need actual support, not just discipline." The accusation landed like a slap. Was that really how he saw me? As some heartless drill sergeant who cared more about rules than her children's well-being? "I support my kids," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I'm the one who drives them to practices and helps with homework and makes sure they eat real food instead of vending machine garbage. Don't you dare suggest I don't support them." "Then support Jake's therapy." "I will. But don't pretend this is about his mental health. This is about you trying to prove I'm a bad parent because I held him accountable for his choices." I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I pulled into a parking lot and sat there, trying to process everything. Jake's grades were slipping. That was real information, important information that Derek had kept from me while painting me as the villain. I called the school, asking to speak with Jake's counselor. After a brief hold, a woman named Mrs. Patterson came on the line. Yes, Mrs. Davis, I've been meaning to reach out to you as well. Jake's teachers have expressed some concerns about his recent performance. What kind of concerns? He's been missing assignments, showing up late to class, seeming distracted and unfocused. His GPA has dropped from a 3.5 to a 2.8 this semester. My stomach dropped. A 2.8? Jake had always been a solid B-plus student, occasionally pulling A's when he really tried. This was a significant decline. Why wasn't I informed earlier? I asked. We did send several emails to the primary contact address on file. Let me check which one that is. Computer keys clicked in the background. It shows Derek Davis's email address as primary contact. Of course it did. Derek must have changed it during registration without telling me. Another way to control the narrative, to make himself the involved parent while keeping me in the dark. Can you add my email as a co-primary contact? I provided the address, adding it to what felt like a growing list of things I needed to fix. Mrs. Patterson promised to keep me updated and suggested we schedule a meeting with all of Jake's teachers to address the grade situation. I agreed, thanked her, and sat in my car feeling like the world's worst mother. How had I missed this? How had I been so focused on the lunch money situation that I hadn't noticed my son was struggling academically? But I had noticed something was off. The breakfast purchases at school, the constant snacking from vending machines. Maybe that wasn't just teenage carelessness. Maybe it was stress eating, anxiety manifesting in poor choices. I called Derek back. He answered on the first ring. I just talked to Jake's counselor, I said without preamble. Why didn't you tell me his grades were dropping? I did tell you, just now, on the phone. After you already scheduled therapy and made me look like the parent who doesn't care enough to be involved. Michelle, this isn't about you. It's about Jake. He was right. I hated that he was right. But this wasn't the time for our ongoing power struggle. Jake needed help, and I needed to put my ego aside long enough to figure out what was actually going on with him. Can I come to the therapy appointment? I asked. It's tomorrow at 4. The office is on Maple Street, next to the urgent care. I'll be there. I spent the rest of the day working from home, my freelance writing projects getting minimal attention as I spiraled through worst-case scenarios. Was Jake depressed? Anxious? Was something happening at school that I didn't know about? Was he being bullied or struggling with something he felt he couldn't tell me? That evening, I sat Sarah and Marcus down after dinner. I need you both to be completely honest with me, I started. Is something going on with Jake? Something I should know about? They exchanged glances again, that silent sibling communication that sometimes felt like a foreign language. Define something, Sarah said carefully. Anything. Is he being bullied? Is he having problems with friends? Girlfriend troubles? Anything that might explain why his grades are dropping and why he's been acting differently. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. I mean, he's been kind of stressed about football. Coach has been riding him pretty hard about his performance. That was news to me. I thought he was doing well on the team. He was last year. This year he's not starting anymore. He's on second string. I think it's messing with his head. Sarah nodded slowly. And Ashley is super involved in theater. Like all her time goes to rehearsals and stuff. I think he feels like he's not seeing her enough, and that's making him anxious. Pieces started fitting together. Jake was struggling with his athletic performance, feeling insecure about his relationship, and probably experiencing the normal stress of being a junior in high school when grades suddenly mattered for college applications. And instead of talking to me about any of it, he'd coped by spending money on comfort food and avoiding the problem. Why didn't you tell me any of this? I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer. Because you'd tell him to work harder and figure it out, Sarah said bluntly. That's always your answer to everything. Just try harder. Just be more disciplined. That's not fair. Maybe not, but that's how it feels sometimes. The words hit harder than any accusation Derek had thrown at me. My own daughter saw me as unapproachable, as someone who valued discipline over emotional support. When had that happened? When had I become so focused on teaching responsibility that I forgot to just listen? I'm sorry, I said quietly. I didn't realize I was making you all feel like you couldn't talk to me. Marcus reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're not a bad mom. You're just really intense sometimes. Dad's easier to talk to because he doesn't try to fix everything. He just listens. There it was, the truth I'd been avoiding. Derek wasn't a better parent because he was more permissive. He was more approachable because he didn't immediately jump to solutions and consequences. He created space for the kids to be imperfect without feeling judged. I had become so determined to raise responsible, capable adults that I'd forgotten they were still kids who needed grace and understanding alongside structure and discipline. The therapy appointment the next day was at a small office with calming blue walls and comfortable chairs. Jake sat between Derek and me, his body language screaming discomfort. The therapist, Dr. Morrison, was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an easy manner that immediately put Jake at ease. So, Jake, she started after introductions, your dad mentioned you've been feeling stressed lately. Want to tell me about that? Jake glanced at Derek, then at me, then down at his hands. I guess school has been harder this year, and football isn't going great, and my girlfriend is always busy. Those sound like significant stressors. How have you been coping with those feelings? I don't know. I just try not to think about it. Buy stuff that makes me feel better, I guess. Like food from the school vending machines and cafe? He nodded, surprised she'd made the connection. Yeah, it's stupid, I know. It's not stupid, Dr. Morrison said gently. Using food for comfort is actually a very common coping mechanism. It's just not always the healthiest one. Tell me, when you're feeling stressed, do you talk to anyone about it? Jake shook his head. Not really. My friends wouldn't get it, and my parents either want to fix it or tell me I'm overreacting. I winced at the accuracy of his assessment. Dr. Morrison noticed. Mom, what's your reaction to hearing that? She asked. I feel terrible, I admitted. I didn't realize Jake felt like he couldn't come to me with problems. I thought I was teaching him to be independent and solve his own issues. There's a balance, Dr. Morrison said, between fostering independence and providing emotional support. It sounds like Jake might benefit from having someone he can talk to who won't immediately try to solve the problem, but will just listen and validate his feelings. The session continued for another 40 minutes, with Dr. Morrison helping Jake identify his stressors and develop healthier coping mechanisms. She suggested weekly sessions for the next 2 months to work through his anxiety around school and relationships. As we walked out to our cars, Jake lingered near me instead of immediately going to Derek's vehicle. I'm sorry about the lunch money thing, he said quietly. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I just wasn't thinking about it. I'm sorry too, I replied. I should have asked why you were spending so much, instead of just punishing you for it. I didn't realize you were stressed. Can I maybe come back to your place tonight? I kind of miss Marcus's annoying face. I smiled, blinking back unexpected tears. Of course, anytime you want. Derek watched us from across the parking lot, his expression unreadable. As Jake climbed into my car, Derek approached. That went well, he said, almost grudgingly. It did. Thank you for setting it up. And thank you for coming. I know I didn't handle this whole situation great. I shouldn't have cut you out of the decision-making. I shouldn't have been so rigid about the money thing without trying to understand what was really going on. We stood there awkwardly, two people who once loved each other enough to build a family, now struggling to co-parent across the divide of divorce and different philosophies. We should probably try to get on the same page more, Derek said, for the kids' sake. Agreed. Maybe we could do a weekly check-in, just 15 minutes to make sure we're both aware of what's happening with them. He nodded. That sounds good. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Derek and I would probably never fully agree on parenting strategies, but maybe we didn't need to. Maybe we just needed to communicate better, to see each other as partners in raising these 3 humans, instead of adversaries fighting for the title of better parent. Over the next few weeks, things slowly improved. Jake continued therapy and started opening up more about his struggles. His grades stabilized as we worked with his teachers to develop better study habits. He and Ashley broke up, which hurt, but he handled it with surprising maturity. The lunch money stayed in his account as a reminder of the lesson learned. He never went negative again, carefully tracking his spending and even packing lunch twice a week to save money. Sarah got accepted to her top choice college with a partial scholarship. Marcus made the varsity basketball team. Our little family, split between two households, found a new rhythm that worked better than before. I learned to ask more questions before jumping to consequences, to create space for my kids to be imperfect without judgment. Derek learned to enforce boundaries more consistently, to support me even when he disagreed with my methods. We weren't perfect, but we were trying, and sometimes that's enough. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Did I handle the lunch money situation correctly, or should I have been more understanding from the start?